Hi, welcome, Soul Tribe. I'm so excited to have you all here and to be talking about fungi, extraterrestrial super intelligence. And I know I've talked about DMT on another show, and we've sort of talked a little bit on extraterrestrial intelligence, perhaps intermixed with nature. And yeah, and I do think that there is a connection with fairies and with mushrooms and toadstools and fungus and things of that sort of nature. But before we get into it, and sorry about my lighting, I've had where I'm blowing up lights lately. So my lights are like on half strength. So yeah. Anyway, joys of having electrical issues in my family. My grandma was similar. So I wanted to remind you guys that we have a few things happening on Maison Jupiter, which is really exciting. So we have Elena's candles are back, which is really beautiful. So nice now that the weather is getting a little bit cooler on your side of the world. So we also have the gorgeous Sophie with her tarot readings, and I have the holistic wellness, the starseed readings, and the mystical oracle readings. So for any of these readings, and I do encourage to book because it is an amazing once in a lifetime, or if you have a few sessions with me, a few times in a lifetime session, and it really is valuable information that we get out of a session. So I do love doing it. It is my soul mission and my purpose to really provide and connect people with information, not just to do with their soul mission, but it's also to help us in this ascension process. So yeah, you get aura drawings with both the starseed and the mystical oracle reading, and they are a lot of fun. Also, I am going away soon. I'm going back to the States. So yeah, I'll open up the bookings either side of that trip, but I am going to be gone for part of October, part of November. The other thing I wanted to remind you guys is please to hit that thumbs up and do share it out. We are building so much on this channel, and us girls really appreciate your support as well. So this quote I found here is a really lovely quote, and I thought it's a great way to set the tone for tonight. It's an Alice one. So you guys know I love Alice in Wonderland, but it says, "But I nearly forgot. You must close your eyes, otherwise you won't see anything." And I thought this is such a a really true statement when it comes to the world of mushrooms and toadstools and our interdimensional connection, not just to those species, but also to fairies and to the elves and the gnomes and the other beings that occupy the space that is a little bit more unseen. So it's interesting that mushrooms and toadstools have become that interdimensional communication system for a lot of people. And I also, because you might be questioning or wondering, I haven't actually tried mushrooms myself. Working as a psychic, I'm able to connect or have them reach out to me or encourage me to look into certain information. What is also said is that you're not supposed to actively go and seek these things. It is also said that they will reach out to you if there's a message or communication. So I, as a child, have just been surrounded by them. As you can see here, this is one from my parents' yard. They do tend to grow in unison with birch trees. So we used to have silver birch trees lining the driveway until some kind of bug or parasite got to them. But yeah, we still have one birch tree left there, and you'll see these beautiful toadstools, which are the ones that are poisonous. So you don't want to go eating them. But sometimes we would have like little fairy rings, and we still get giant ones that are bigger than my head that are the brown kind of variety. So there's always been a lot of fairy activity around where I've grown up, and I'm not too far from there now either. But yeah, as you guys see, we have the fairies here, and we've got the birds join us. I just realized there's a heap of them. I don't know if you guys can see in the tree. They're probably up a little bit higher than my camera will allow to show. And I just want to say a big shout out to everyone. And yeah, it's an exciting topic. So I also will be taking questions tonight as well. Please put your questions in all caps if you have questions specifically on mushrooms, fungus, or the interdimensional connection between the two of them. And let me just get rid of some windows that we've used. And the other one that I also wanted to show you before we get too into it is this beautiful quote. And I can see a lot of soul family in here. So thank you for joining us, Soul Tribe. And Yeah, I thought it's a topic that we'll all enjoy as well. So, yeah, please put your questions in all caps. And I'm just going to pop this down. So, Rudolf Steiner said the human body remains in its undeveloped state if it does not take up the stuff of transformation within him and develop himself through his own power. Nature makes a human into merely a natural being. Society makes him into a law abiding being, and only he can make himself into a free being. So, oh, thank you, Tim. I'm going to save that little question that you've got. So, yeah, with Rudolf Steiner and with theosophy and anthroposophy, what we sort of see is he will talk about as children, it's usually around age 7 that our auras will separate. And we'll be distancing ourselves further from the spiritual realms and the spiritual world. And you've heard me talk on other shows about the different foods that we will partake in or that we're supposed to have while we're still in connection with the spiritual realms. So it's a lot of like more the fruits and things that are closer to the heavens. And I've also talked about flower essences and things of that sort of nature because they are tied in with the ethereal world. So when we come further into our beingness and our humanness and further grounded into the earth, it really is interesting that he recommends or talks about like eating the root vegetables and things. So what is the mushroom kingdom then? Because, it's not a vegetable. It's not, even though we eat it like it's a vegetable, it's very, very different. There is a sentience that comes with mushrooms and with toadstools, and you can see them fighting over the food I put out for them. But yeah, there is, I think they deserve a whole nother kingdom of themselves because they are intelligent, and I will show you some videos of just how intelligent they are tonight as well. But yeah, when we look into it, they're not a crystal. So I think we actually have an extra kingdom, and there's many different documentaries. One of my favorite speakers that talks on the subject is Paul Stamets. I think he's such a value to our modern day society and exploration into the mushroom kingdom, as was psychonaut Terence McKenna as well. Yeah, so mushroom does have fruiting like qualities. They do have a fruit that sort of comes with it, when they spore and what they produce. So they do talk about them having a fruiting like quality. Where I'm sort of more talking about it is in terms of kingdoms and consciousness. And I just find, okay, this one, let me just stop my screen share and reshare it for a second. This one has audio, so I just have to change the settings. Okay.
News. Scientists created a living skin out of fungi, and yes, they knew exactly what they were doing. This same group also made robots piloted by fungus, and they learned to use their bodies. We'll talk about it. This group found that if they gave fungus control of a robot body and gave it sensory input, it would indeed start using it. Fungi do not like light. What you're watching is them essentially just making the fungus really uncomfortable, and it gives it the ability to start moving. In this experiment, they did the same thing, except they gave it some wheels. Fungi function very much like a neuron, and this is why we can interface them with electronics. The idea of fungi having neuroplasticity, though, is pretty interesting, that they can indeed learn to operate a body that they never should have had. Although the training of robots via torture does feel a little wrong. In a different paper, they created a living skin with sensation that they used to put on a robot. And yes, they knew exactly what they were doing because scientists have a sense of humor too. This is a nightmare machine. Yes, fungi may behave pretty similarly to human neurons, and this is just a trial just to demonstrate it's possible. These kinds of robots fill gaps that we have in our AI. AI can only mimic, and it ends up declining over time. These kinds of robots can learn and come up with new ideas. They were never taught to walk, they figured it out. In unholy nightmare creation news, scientists created a living...
Okay, so I thought that was an interesting one to share because something's going on. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting one to share. And this is where I really want us to look at it from mushrooms perhaps being a kingdom unto their own. So we see throughout folklore and fairy culture and a lot of the old ancient paintings that they will draw, fairy circles, and, there's talk of not to go into a fairy circle because you might not return. But what about if we look at it from the extraterrestrial point of view? And I will just show you. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, it's super interesting, isn't it? Oh, and thank you for the compliment too. That is beautiful. Okay. So, one of my favorite people, and you can see him on Netflix as well, Paul Stamets. Really, really just a beautiful, amazing mind, and such an inquisitive mind. Often seen wearing a hat made out of a mushroom, because we can also make leathers and things like that out of mushrooms. So, yeah, he's a mycologist. So, he discusses the potential extraterrestrial uses of fungi, including terraforming planets, building human habitats, and providing psilocybin therapy to astronauts. So he's really sort of looking at like the value that mushrooms and fungi can bring into the extraterrestrial, I guess, exploration. So it's really interesting when we look at normal plants, or we look at fruits, and we look at vegetables. This is where we also see like a differentiation with mushrooms, in that they more grow in darkness. So I think that is interesting too. And I'm going to pop your question up now. So, Rainbow Sun, do mushrooms network similar to trees? Yes. So trees have their root system that goes underground, and they are able to communicate if there's perhaps a threat. They can communicate to the other tree, and they can sort of help and work with each other. So they're kind of like a family, a network, or communication network. Now, when we think about the holographic side of things too. Thank you, Emma. We'll see you on the replay. When we think about things holographically, I want you to think about tree networks and branches and roots, and also the mycelium network, which is their little underground communication network, really representing the brain. So the difference with the mycelium network is that it does go underground, but it can go for miles and miles and miles, even extending underneath oceans and things, it is said. But they can communicate one thing. So if you talk to a tree or you talk to a mushroom and you ask it to pass on a message, it could technically be able to pass that message on. The other thing that was found in that study with the robot was that they were able to understand and recognize 50 different human words. So they are sentient, they are intelligent. And back to what I was saying to do with mushrooms, and just being careful to do with if you are going to be taking them or activating that DMT, you really need to also have a look at, are they reaching out to you? So and one example is, I've had dreams where they've communicated in dreams on the medicinal variety, like when I had a cold one time, and I saw different types of fungus and things in my dream. It was almost like a giant cloud trying to speak in the morning. It turned out it was great for respiratory, that it really tries to help, I guess, get anything off the chest that's not supposed to be there. So yeah, they do try and help us. And we see this in the movie Super Mario Brothers, where they're like, I think the fungus is trying to help us. And the fungus is trying to give them a little, I think it was a little bomb or something to help win the battle against the reptilians. So yeah, interesting that we sort of see these things in culture and that. And I can see Amy Rose saying, I think mushrooms are great for your third eye. I eat a lot of them. Yeah, and it's interesting because they're high in B vitamins. And when we look into B vitamins, what's interesting for me geeking out over B vitamins is that people that have the MTFHR gene, which is more your neurodivergence, people that are like hypermobile or have hyperplasticity, or like, super flexible, what you find is that they tend to have more of an MTFHR gene, which just means like that they can't absorb and assimilate some of the types of B vitamins. So they have to have a methylated form of like B12 and folate. And I think it might be B6 as well. But anyway, I think that we all should be having methylated vitamins if it's going to help our brains function better and we're going to optimize things. There's no harm in having a natural, sort of more organic one as opposed to the synthetic ones. And it's really interesting that the synthetic ones are put into pretty much a lot of mass-produced food. So even like your almond milks, your oat milks, things like that, you'll find synthetic B vitamins and things, which if you have methylation issues, your body actually sort of holds that like plastic. It can't work with it. So really interesting that mushrooms naturally will have B vitamins and things in it. I think that they're perhaps some way in tune with working with our consciousness. Hey, John. And yeah, anyway, so this was an interesting article. Let me pop my window back up with Paul Stamets. Oh, awesome, Nadia. So she's saying both my kids love finding mushrooms. Every morning they are so excited to go outside and see what new mushroom has grown. Gosh, that's making me want to go explore my parents' place in the forest. And they come up so fast. They do. They come up overnight. Okay. I just highlighted your question to Britt Marie. I will have a look at that as well. So anyway, this was a really interesting article. Anything that Paul Stamets does, I find interesting. He does have some really great documentaries that you guys can check out. But yeah, in the new I cannot pronounce this, Astromycology venture launched in conjunction with NASA, Stamets and various research teams are studying how fungi can be leveraged to build extraterrestrial habitats and perhaps someday even terraform planets. So this is not the first time Stamets' career has intersected with speculative space science. He also recently received an honor by that many researchers would consider only slightly less hallowed than the Nobel Prize. This is distinction of having a Star Trek character named after him. So that's quite cool, I thought. And this one was interesting. So when we look into what we were saying before around mushrooms more growing in darkness, whereas like plants and fruits and vegetables will actually grow in light and they work through photosynthesis. There was a study done where they put mushrooms on the ISS, International Space Station, and you've got to withstand and be able to survive a lot of radiation. So normal plants and things cannot survive in a condition like that and out in the dark. Now, I'm not saying that means everything to do with space is, we're still on this trying to understand the rabbit hole of lies that we've been led down with things too. But I'm just sort of bringing together information that is said in the mainstream as well. So anyway, essentially, this talks about scientists spot fungus growing on Mars in the NASA rover. But going back to the International Space Station side of things, I think it was about 35% survived. I think it was exposure of 180 days to that radiation and things, where if you look at what they're saying with that alone, if we're thinking about like a meteorite coming to Earth and spores or fungi or little mycelium connections and things on these meteorites, if they crash land into another planet, does that mean that they can terraform that? So it seems to be that they could survive. Some people even say that they could survive for thousands of years on meteorites in space. What's interesting is that they do have their own intelligence and things too. And, it's not just humans that are drawn or captivated by psychedelics or by mushrooms, it's animals too. There's certain types of animals that will actually eat mushrooms. So even in the more Scandinavian side of the world, we see those little red toadstools that I showed before. The deers will eat them and the shamans will collect the urine and take the DMT that way because it doesn't have as many of the toxins in it. So there's all different ways of I guess interacting with mushrooms. And I was looking for a photo on my phone that I can't find of the tiny little iridescent blue ones that look like they're out of Avatar, which is, I think, another form of magic mushroom. I also, as I've mentioned on another show, have had magic mushrooms sprout up in one of the old houses I lived in. They popped up out of the bathroom floor. And that was around the same time I was having dreams. So you will have where they will reach out to you. That bathroom later had to get redone because there was just too many things happening in that really, really old house. But yeah, in this, It was more the review, I think, that was interesting. So it was just going into talking about how you need water, and they were talking about even with small amounts of water that you could perhaps, grow life or grow fungus. And when we think about fungus, it really grows more on decomposing matter. So it is, yeah, whether it's grown in poop, to put it lightly, or whether it's also grown on the bottom of at the forest floor. So we also see that there's a lot of fulvic acid, and fulvic acid and humic acid is one of those things that is essential for cellular activation and communication. We use it in anti-aging. We use it in terms of like getting electricity into cells and things. So I find that it's interesting that mushrooms tend to thrive in this kind of fumic acid type environment. So I think there's a lot more going on in the microscopic, holographic, universal side. I think there's a universe happening within there. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I think one day when I'm ready, I think it will be really interesting. I also want to talk about one thing that I am intrigued with. Let me see if I can find this. I'm just going to close some of these windows. There is one, here it is. Let me just show you guys this. So this is an interesting study, and I've seen other ones as well, to do with microdosing with psychedelics to self-medicate for ADHD symptoms in adults, and a perspective on naturalistic study. So I actually have heard firsthand of people that have under particular studies and things, and even with ones that are not, I guess, regulated, trying it out to do with ADHD. So, always do your own research. But this is really, really interesting because there's new neural network growth being able to activate. So if we're looking at, let me just see if I can find something. All right. I'll just bring up my window again. So if we're looking at this perhaps being like some neurons in the brain, and we've got some others here, and your brain's finding it hard to communicate this, perhaps looking into things like psilocybin can actually grow new neural network activity so that we can get these neurons firing and wiring together. So these are the sorts of things that they're finding in some of the studies. What's interesting too is like with psilocybin, the way I'm sort of looking at it into some of these studies and things, and this is where it starts to connect in with the ET side of things. Say we've got our brain, and this is the hardware, this is the computer, it's the hard drive. If we're taking something in terms of like a substance that has the ability to perhaps produce new hardware or new neural network growth, are we installing alien programs? Or are we installing programs that are coming in from a higher level or a higher dimensional consciousness coming in? So are we perhaps learning about like our ET ancestry? It's really interesting because people see elves and fairies and mantis beings and all sorts of other insectoid-like ones. And on my last show I did on the DMT subject, I think I referenced a book. I'm trying to think of the name of it. I might have to go back and find what the name was, but essentially there's been studies to do with DMT, and what they've found is that when they've collated those studies, people are not just seeing one-off fantasy type things. There really is like you're able to reproduce and even map out. There's a terraform version of these higher dimensions. So when people are working with them, I think that it's installing new kind of like pathways or bridges to connect to these other worlds. Now, working as a clairvoyant, and working from a psychic point of view, I think when we're really sensitive, we don't need to ingest or take these things in order to get there. It can help bridge between worlds. But yeah, I do feel that we can learn things. And I do feel that, they've come in perhaps from somewhere else onto our earth. And there's messages and codes and information. And it's interesting that their network, their mycelium network, extends across our whole realm. So yeah, is this network still still in communication with our ET families and perhaps like off-world intelligence? I think that is a question maybe that we can look into. If anyone wants to type a question similar or remind me, that could be something that we could look into as well. Oh, thanks, Lisa. Interesting, Rainbow Sun. So Rainbow Sun is saying, I had hundreds of tiny mushrooms pop up overnight in the mushroom mixed soil in the garden bed. It was so beautiful. Yeah, there's a really interesting consciousness if you meditate and connect with them. The ones that I've sort of, I guess, communicated with or experienced, and it's similar to like how we work with animal communication, it's dropping your consciousness into a certain level of brain waves that opens up your, I guess, your telepathy to be able to communicate with them as well. Thank you, Tim. Perfect. All right, let me bring back up this little page. So, this is really interesting. If you do struggle with things like myself, ADHD, it could be interesting to look into if there's anything, that could help. And this is on a microdosing level as well. But yeah, there is studies out there. I just wanted you guys to know that. So we also have another article. This is more to do with lion's mane. And it's mushrooms magnifying memory by boosting nerve growth. So is this the new limitless pill or the very old ancient limitless pill? And it's just interesting how there is sort of like a co-relationship throughout our history, especially in Druidic culture as well, and Druidic timelines and the medieval timelines. We see a lot of artwork and things around this. But as you can see, this mushroom looks like a brain. So this was actually a study done, mushrooms magnifying memory by boosting nerve growth. This was here in Queensland in Australia. So they do some interesting studies to do with DNA and sending information from their Queensland headquarters over to, I think it was LA, to do with DNA. There's a lot of like interesting physics and science that they do here. So it says here, using super resolution microscopy, we found that the mushroom extract and its active components largely increase the size of growth cones, which are particularly important for brain cells to sense their environment and establish new connections with other neurons in the brain. So yeah, this was an interesting one. And let me just see what else I had. There's also this documentary, which says it's on Netflix here in Australia and New Zealand. I haven't looked it up. I've only viewed the trailer. It looks like an incredible cinematography type experience. And it says here, so it's called Follow the Rain. Let me see if this comes up. I will just bring this up. Hold on a sec, guys, so you can hear it. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a little teaser. I have to be careful to not share too much here with things on YouTube. So let me just pop this one down. And the other thing too, this was really great, Stevie Ray. So This is actually reminding me. So when we look into Earth and we look into the mycelium being almost like neural networks, so if we're looking at it holographically, these are almost like the brain of the Earth or the network system and communication highway as well. So is this perhaps like entrained with Gaia? Is there some way that like the mushrooms, the kind of like whether it's like the brain of the Earth, who knows? There's so many things to postulate on. But yeah, Stevie Ray said spectacularly amazing, definitely cosmic contact through the living holographic systems within the Mother of Sophia, Epioneos, eternal spirit. Yeah, so I think that there's something like that happening too. And let me have a look at, oh, this one. So this is also another example of mushrooms in society and throughout the ages. So we see here that there is different little statues and things in different cultures. So this one, we see the Aztecs. So there tends to be sort of like a worship or an understanding of connection with mushrooms. So this is the Maya mushroom stones in Guatemala. So yeah, there's so many different interesting things. If you type in mushrooms in history, you'll find a whole heap of things that are super interesting. And this was an interesting one. So this is mushroom head depiction shared by Sander Way and Bradshaw cultures. So it's essentially, they're saying that this was a depiction or a drawing to do with what people taking mushrooms. So this sort of is meant to represent people taking mushrooms. Now, we know sometimes that there's a little bit of false information thrown into certain things. So is this perhaps a being, or is it trying to maybe show the consciousness of mushrooms? It also, to me, looks extremely like some of the fairy-like beings that are sort of part nature, spirit, elemental type energy. So is it actually from a shamanic perspective, or we know with a lot of the cave stuff, they drew what they saw. So I tend to believe it's probably more that they've drawn what they saw rather than that being the representation of someone who's taking mushrooms. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. But yeah, there's really interesting things to do with, you can see here, oh, it's got pop-ups now. But essentially, if you just type in mushrooms and shamans, you'll get like so many different interesting things pop up. And that is another thing to take note of, is if you are exploring in these realms, you can come across beings like this. So these are similar to what you see on DMT as well, because some of the psilocybin will have the same sort of effect, or the same DMT component, where it's opening your third eye. So down the bottom near the throat chakra area, you see there's like geometry. This is similar to what I've seen on ayahuasca and DMT. But yeah, I've heard people talk about this with mushrooms too. But yeah, this is where sometimes, you might need someone to help you navigate through those kind of experiences or those sort of worlds. Hey, Sophie, lovely to see you here. So yeah, let me pop that one down. And this one as well, I think we did read that one. So yeah, Rudolf Steiner's view, I think, is super interesting. And I find this interesting that it's still something that's celebrated today as well. So the magic of mushrooms and fairy rings. So, we still hear about that connection and about not to enter the fairy ring because you'll get stuck. This was another interesting quote that ties the fairies in. So Terence McKenna, who was a psychonaut, would take what they deem heroic doses of magic mushrooms, psilocybin, all sorts of things. But fairies responded to riddlery. This has to do with the thing about language and the strange relationship of the Irish to intoxication. Fairies in a language that suggests that we might have a restrictive gene pool that somehow indemnified itself in the direction of these peculiar concerns. So what I sort of take from this, and we look into the ancients, and we look into folklore and things of that sort of nature, have we lost our words? Have we lost our communication? I've been researching a bit in the background lately to do with Latin, and really looking into the etymology of different words. And, is there magic that's contained within Latin? Even, watching Harry Potter the other day, I think it's the Fantastic Beasts one, and I'm hearing things, I'm like, this sounds like Latin. So is there more kind of spellbinding, spellcasting words in certain languages that mushrooms and these other fairy realms interact with and understand. And we've forgotten the codes to speak to bring this back into a coexisting relationship as well. And I totally agree. Merlin is absolutely a real being. I believe so too. And that would be actually a really, really interesting show. I've been told in college that I had Merlin thumbs. Apparently, Merlin had bulbous ET looking thumbs. So I think that would be, hey, beautiful. I think that would be a really interesting topic. And you guys let me know in the chat too if there's anything as well. Jim, that's awesome. So yeah, isn't it interesting that it makes its way into art? And let me just bring this up. So this was a really interesting article as well, mushrooms, aliens. So please pop in the chat if you have comments specifically. And Britt, Marie, I'm going to answer your question as well. I saw that and one of Tim's. So yeah, this was just interesting, really kind of like exploring the cosmic connection to mushrooms. And these are little magic mushrooms at the top. These are the type that grew through my bathroom floor, and I literally was feeling them communicate. So again, you can communicate with these ET-like beings through telepathy and through getting yourself into a certain brain state. I've talked about that on so many shows to do with what it takes to get your brain to get into theta or even into gamma. We see now that like mushroom things are super, super popular. And there was something that I was looking for. Here we go. So alien intelligence, mycelial network. So the hidden intelligence. Imagine an underground realm where communication occurs not only through words or signals, but through a vast interconnected world. I just realized you guys can't see what I'm looking at. Hold on a second. So in this little section, if you want to read along with me, so interconnected web of threads. This is the realm of the mycelial network where fungi engage in intricate dance of information exchange. But what is the truly mind-bending is the idea that the hidden intelligence might extend far beyond the forest floor. Mycologists have discovered that mycelium can transmit information such as impending threats or changes in the environment conditions to neighboring organisms. It's a communication system that defies our traditional notion of plant-fungi interaction. Some even speculate that the hidden intelligence could extend beyond our planet, potentially connecting Earth to its far reaches of the cosmos. Could mycelium be the cosmic messenger carrying whispers from the universe itself? And this is exactly when I was sort of starting to touch into the subject, this was my feeling, this was my intuition and the message coming from the mushrooms that I wanted to share and the reason why I wanted to do the show. So it was really an exciting moment to find someone else talking about it in an article. Yeah, it's a fascinating one. So it's called Nature's Internet in this article. So thirdeyesociety.co/blogs news are mushroom aliens. So that was a really, really interesting one. Let me drop this into our little chat because I know you guys are into the same sort of stuff. So I'm just going to pop that in now so you'll be able to have a look at that one. And let me pop this down and let's get into some questions. So I'll go back into the ones that I've marked. Yeah, how cool is that? I love it. Okay. Oh, here we go. So this was the article if you guys want to have a look into it. And okay, just pop it in all caps if you've got one. Oh, and Tim, I have not seen the Attack of the Mushroom People. And as we talked about in the show last week with Evan, which was a little bit hard to hear his sound, unfortunately. But we did talk about The Last of Us. I think it was the one where people get the cordyceps mushroom. Now, what's interesting, I think just like in most duality systems and things, there's the negative and positive. So what we see in, The Last of Us and the zombie mushroom attack, it is said that that is not possible. Yet there was a scientist who was studying different mushrooms and that weren't supposed to be able to transmit into people, that were meant to stay within plants, and he got a fungal infection. So, yeah, so I don't think they know everything just yet around this. Oh, cool. Tim's saying it's an old movie. I will have to look that up. Thank you, Tim. You always have such good recommendations. So let me see. Okay. And do mushrooms network similar to trees? So I think we covered that one as well. Thank you for that, Rainbow Sun. And Brooke Marie said, so Rita, do you know what to take against fungus mold from paranuts? I think it might be, is it parasites? My body got infected by eating. Oh, paranuts. I don't know about paranuts. I'm not sure, but peanuts do have mold and can have growth and things like that, as can coffee, and it can have mold spores even when it's sent out in packages and things. In terms of really eliminating anything out of the body, now I always say do your own research. What I found works for me and family and many others. I found Paracleanse is really good. So usually if there's yeast, mold, fungus in the body, there's also parasites. Usually you'll find there's heavy metals too. So Paracleanse has been probably the cheapest, best one that I've ever found. It's a two-step one. So it's utilizing wormwood, clove, black walnut, as well as neem oil, MCT. So I think the transport system for this, you notice the die off a lot faster, and you do get worms and things come out, and even flukes and things. These little parasites like to make homes in the organ, so it's really important to do. In Asia, they do parasite cleanses twice a year, so usually spring and fall. The other one that is from South America, Pal de Arco, is a South American bark. It eliminates yeast, mold, fungus, candida, bacterial overgrowth. It's a really, really good one. And in Chinese medicine, they tend to use things like this, which is like resistance formula, which has a combination. I'm not even going to try and pronounce these, but they talk about sometimes fungus or mold being like a hidden ghost within the system. So with this, we want to eliminate things that could be perhaps controlling us, just like with cordyceps mushroom that grows like a little parasite. So if we imagine my hand being the caterpillar, and a cordyceps will burrow in and come up and be able to control and hook into the nervous system and the brain of the caterpillar. And we see this within the toxoplasmosis parasite as well with rats that will get into rats and mice, and they will put themselves in front of cats. And as I quoted last week, Elon Musk has also said this is one of the biggest threats to humanity as well. So yeah, it's interesting. If we're letting these things harness or control us on any kind of level, whether it's in the brain, within our second brain, the gut, we are perhaps being hijacked. And that's also why I wanted to talk about parasites and then talk about mushrooms in the next week as well. And I can see John also in the comments recommending different things as well that might be good to investigate and have a look into. Thank you, John. You're so knowledgeable. Let me just see what other questions we have. Okay, so are mushrooms the alien invasion that we didn't notice? So yeah, I do believe that they are alien, they are foreign, but I also believe that maybe perhaps they help terraform and they're part of like that building block to establish an ecosystem and that perhaps like terraform. So it's almost like it's the mycelium network perhaps going down first. So I think there could be really interesting future experiments done around perhaps like terraforming or creating and seeing kind of how the intelligence of these kingdoms work. And I think it'll be interesting what we saw with the robot and what we saw with like being able to teach fungus and mushroom words and teaching it to operate and to do different tasks, how they're literally giving it a body. I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm just saying from a scientific mind, it's very, very interesting. And let me just see. Okay, I'm going to go back and see if you guys have got questions. I want to have a look into the cards and see why it is that the mushrooms were reaching out for us to do this show as well. And that is well said. So Stevie Ray, that's exactly right. You're always going to be in the right spiritual mode if you're going to make any decisions, 100%. And if you've ever done psychedelics, you've not 100% been prepared or ready for it, you can really have yourself handed I was going to say have your butt would be one way handed to you on a platter. So you want to make sure that you've done a lot of purification, that you've cleansed out any of these things that could be living within the gut, or anything in terms of like subconscious things that you need to purge before going into a heightened state of awareness, because you will be meeting beings there. So the first card we have, the shaman card, which is starting to pop up out of my deck. So they're wanting to communicate to us and wanting to communicate to our audience in particular. So let's have a look. Oh, more cards falling out. Wow. And I'm hearing the word resistance with this, which is very, very interesting. So what we're seeing in terms of like why mushrooms were reaching out to us to do this show, and these cards I've just popped face up. You guys know I usually read them face down, but sometimes when the card deck's falling apart in that way, and really good point. You're never too old to expand your consciousness. I totally agree. And I'm going to highlight anyone who's got questions in caps. But yeah, what we see is shamanically, they're wanting to come back to us. We're at a time and we're at a development here on Gaia of where we actually need to, we need to be aware of different things that are subtly trying to communicate and reach out. So it's not just the animals, it's not just the trees, it's the fungus, it's the mushrooms as well. And what we see is there's some kind of like interference or something trying to block communication. So this could even be how things have been shut down in the past, or they're only now researching studies around DMT and psilocybin. It's also utilized for PTSD and depression, and a lot of people have had incredible results. I do know a few friends that have also experienced things like that and been part of the studies. Environment is everything too. That's super important. So the next thing that we see, this is also about freeing our mind. So an Eight of Swords for me is where we're in a stuck or a fixed mindset, and there's more to explore. We're only looking at things from inside a container or through our own neural network growth. So they do want to expand and bring us more into kind of like a brother sisterhood. This is my soul family card. Okay, awesome question, Jake. Yeah, so a 10 of discs, this is about bringing us into a similar level and more into the community as well, to do with like higher level of consciousness. The other thing that we have is Princess of Disc. So this is more about making our own minds up. For me, she's one who doesn't accept what's told and programmed into her. So this is really someone who like sets her own perimeters. She also is really fiery, being Aries, and she also starts to create her reality. So I know we talk about that a lot in my shows. It's something that I'm really obsessed with. But yeah, there seems to be a message coming through from the mushrooms about escaping the paradigm that we've been programmed to, opening up to a wider, vaster way of connecting with the universe, connecting with quantum reality, and connecting with plasma, because we talk about plasma a lot too. But I actually feel that we can override things. We can actually program things from inside the matrix, inside the system. So we're spiritual beings that have come as little gardeners, little programmers. And yeah, there's a completion that we need to do. We need to come full circle and work back with these intelligent species that have been sent here. So a two of wands for me is duality. The third one is bringing the God aspect, bringing higher consciousness back in. So that is their mission, their message for us working with them today. But I really feel that they're putting the power back in our hands in terms of us realizing just how we actually do create our own reality. We do have choice, but we need a break out of the program. We need to stop thinking so limited. So the other questions we've got is the Tower in reverse. If we can get out of the program and stop operating within such a confined Eight of Swords system, that's how we topple the tower. And interesting, because we know in Hebrew, the glyph associated with the tower is per. Our words are as precious as gold. So maybe it's to actually put out there verbally when you're walking in the forest or amongst nature, to connect and to receive messages from the fungus and from the mushrooms that have our best and highest interest at heart. So ask to connect to that kingdom, ask to receive information on what we can do, not only to help down here in the earth, but what can we do in terms of psychic growth and things, because it's so interesting that there's a DMT, psychoactive dimethyltryptamine component that comes with taking some of these. They really are trying to communicate. And I love that, Britt. So Britt said, I've started to use EMF against fungus and mold now. Yeah. And we also know that fungus, it's interesting when we look into radiation and things, or we look into exposure to like nuclear waste and things, it's things like marijuana, the plant, I'm trying to think of the name of it. Anyway, that plant and also mushrooms that can absorb radiation and soak things up. So I think it's our friend as well. But we don't want it living maybe perhaps inside our bowels, inside our brains. But yeah, what we see with this tower coming down, we have a Knight of Wands energy. And this is Phoenix energy rising from the ashes. It's to start, that's the name I was looking for. Thank you guys. Cannabis, hemp. I had a brain block. So yeah, Knight of Wands. This is interesting. This is my card that I call the Tony Robbins card. That's the nickname Spirit has given this card. And essentially what this means is we have higher realms to climb. We have higher states of consciousness available for us to access. So think the movie Lucy, think the movie Limitless. There's something to be gained from this neural network. And we've got a Six of Cups. Six of Cups is the card of pleasure. It's Scorpio energy. It's the sun. And we see here that this is dominated by very fairy unicorn, otherworldly energy. And with the Six of Cups, for me, this is my flagship card to represent connecting to otherworldly realms and dimensions, or that there's other versions of us wanting to stream in to tell us information from another level. So that's really, really fascinating. And I'm just going to bring up John's comment. So fun fact, melatonin is only one molecule different than DMT. Why no blue light and pitch black room for sleep can take melatonin and then convert it to DMT while sleeping, lucid dreams. And the other fun fact with that is when you take melatonin, it helps to decalcify the pineal gland. So you will actually have where it starts to purge out any calcification, and you start to have more DMT-like experiences in your dreams. And I've just had a friend send me yesterday a little video that I'm starting to explore exactly around this topic and around auras connected to do with melanin and things like that. So I'll keep you updated. And they're asking me for another card, King of Wands. This is to take back our spiritual sovereignty. Let me ask if there's anything else or any other reason that the mushrooms wanted to communicate to us. Or actually, let me rephrase that. And I'll just pop these back in. Is there anything that we can do right now to be more connected with them and to be more open to receiving information from them? I'm hearing the words to be open and aware of your environment and to look down. It's interesting because we talk about looking up in, the UFO side of things and that too. Okay, and I'm just hearing a high pitch. So we have, and I had a feeling this card might come back out. So we have the Knight of Swords. So they're trying to communicate information on how part of our world has been hijacked. So we need to go back to the ways of the old, the ways of like the druids, the ways of the witches to receive information. And we've got Knight of Wands energy again. So we need to remember as one of the first steps. We've forgotten. So explore, go back, look into history, look into what is the folklore around a lot of these things. what is, I guess, the folklore around maybe not hopping into fairy circles and things too, but it would be to be aware of these other realms. And as we have the fairies show up, and I think with my light being a little bit darker, they're much harder to see, but I have actually felt and experienced them around outside this morning. So they might be just a little bit harder to see without the light working properly. I think it magnifies and helps the camera capture them in our dimension a little bit easier. Oh, and the other thing too, with mushrooms and with fungus, they actually, some of the ships like UFOs and things like that, that I've had experiences on, and my beautiful friend Barry Littleton, who's been on here as well, some of them will have a core that operates the ship that's a living intelligence, that's like a fungus. So living, breathing, core kind of central engine brain part of a ship. So Jake said, are mushrooms channels in the earth like Q or like chi lines in the human body? They could be. And what was interesting in that other article to do with, if we're looking at it from the holographic level, which I know you're so into, Jake, in that other article, they did talk about cones in the I think it was with the lion's mane. Now, remember, lion's mane crosses blood-brain barrier. So they talked about having cones in there. Now, if we look holographically, we have cones and receptors in our eyes as well. So I think that, they're always sort of like mirror different things. So I wonder if there is a correlation between the ley lines being connected with the mushrooms and that. So I'm going to ask with your question, let's ask the cards. Okay, so are mushrooms channels in the earth like key lines or chi lines in the human body? What I'm sort of picking up on is they're more like the brain. So it's more kind of like our neural network or growth rather than the acupuncture system. Yeah, I think we'll find out more in time holographically. And the more that we sort of look at them under experiments and microscopes, but what we're seeing in regards to your question is we have a 3 of disc. So there is the foundation connection. 3 of disc is my gateway to get up and out of this matrix too. So they keep talking about there's some kind of communication aspect that they're here on Earth, but they're also somewhere else. So the chariot, this is more that we're going to find more information as we move further along, but we've got Ace of Cups. So Ace of Cups, we need to form a new relationship with them. We need to really get to know them. And there's been a lot of fear and propaganda around this particular subject. So with this too, this is about activating your light body, activating higher forms of consciousness. Let me just see. Oh yeah, so in the Fantastic Fungi movie, they showed the forest just like a brain with a neural network. That is so true. And let me just see if there's any other questions. Yeah, so true, Stevie Ray. Fact is, we've been lied to about a lot of things, especially green, living, holographic, nurtured nature life. I think so as well. And I'll just see if there was any other questions. Okay, so John is saying, seems like our brain has DMT. You can release it naturally, happens at death or near death to cross over. And yeah, it's interesting because they talk about, and I've showed some videos. I don't know if I've showed it on here. I know that I've showed my partner these. To do with that death, sometimes you find people that are like this, as though they're reaching out to something, and they might have an interesting look on their face. There's many stories of people on sort of like the end where they're talking about seeing different beings and things like that. So I think there is some kind of DMT component that perhaps triggers in that death process. What we also see is spirit starting to leave the body clairvoyantly, and we see that it's maybe only on a few acupuncture points. So I'll just see if you guys have any more questions. I'm just going to read Tim's question as well. So on the ship where I was in the Navy, some of the ropes was still hemp and the guys would put it in the pipes and smoke it. Interesting. I love hearing your stories, guys. Okay. And Corbin also saying, that's really interesting, John. I take melatonin before bed and I do lucid dream often. I find if I take it, and this is one of those things that you don't want to take it regularly because your brain also is, you don't want to drain your resources and stop your body from producing it naturally. So I find that if I'm taking melatonin, that I actually am awake within the dreams. So if I want more of a psychedelic kind of ask questions or be awake within my dreams to get some answers, it's a good thing. But if I'm wanting a real knockout sleep, it actually doesn't work for me in that way. So just be careful if you're sensitive. Always do your own research. And I'm just checking, is there any other questions? Oh, great question, Seema. So why is DMT so alien? So is it perhaps like medicine or a messenger to connect with us on a human consciousness level? Now, if you guys remember back to last year when I was doing some other galactic shows as well, I actually did a show on DMT, and there was one study that is more of a peer-based study, meaning that like it's just people in our general public. If you Google DMT laser study, you'll find more of it. Or if you go back, I've got my playlist saved on my channel, like all the type of galactic shows and things I've done. So you might find it earlier on a year ago. But what was found was that when they would actually cross two lasers, and they had to be lasers, I think, that were not like a direct spectrum from memory. It's been a while since I've done the show, but essentially it was like a fractured kind of light or diffracted laser. And when they crossed them, you actually could see code. So when people took DMT and they put these lasers together, what they found was there was almost like a holographic kind of printed code. Alex Gray's wife, who does a lot of the psychedelic artwork and things, art, has actually drawn symbols that are similar. And yeah, people just think that they need to perhaps decode. What is said about this is that perhaps it is the fundamental underlying code to this matrix. So I find it really, really interesting. When I hand scanned and fell into it with psychometry, that was the information that I picked up, was there is code running this reality or matrix, and that perhaps this is what we're seeing when DMT is taken. It's almost that code like Neo sees in the screen as well. So yeah, that is a really great question. Thank you for that one. And a great one to perhaps revisit that topic and see if there's anything else that they've found to do with this. But yeah, they were able to reproduce it over and over again. And yeah, it's an interesting feeling, isn't it, when that pineal pops open? Has anyone experienced amrita, or where the pineal gland drips that honey like nectar, and you can actually taste it? And there's a Kundalini experience with this. So in some recent shows that I've done, more on my channel with like the CIA Gateway document, we did talk about like activating the Kundalini and activating the pineal as well. Oh, awesome, Dee. So Deanne said yes. That's so cool. I would love to hear about your experiences, guys, with all of this side of things. Oh, Jake, there's your question. I was looking for that one. So bioluminescent mushrooms. So they've actually been able to, not only do we have like bioluminescent qualities, and Barry Littleton talks about this too. I think there might be a show he's done on his channel. If you go onto YouTube, type in Barry Littleton and maybe type in bioluminescent. I'll have to have a look for it. But it's interesting because we have fireflies and glowworms and things like that. Things in nature that have a component of like this bioluminescence. And don't forget, like, flies or bugs and insects and other creatures will sometimes see more with bioluminescent UV DMT like eyesight. So ours is very flat in comparison. So are we perhaps more on the limited aspect compared to some of the other creatures that are occupying the earth? What's interesting is they're now able to, and this is the Frankenstein spectrum of science, which is not so good, but they're talking about lighting roads and things with bioluminescent trees. Now, these are trees that have been genetically modified to cross certain species that have bioluminescence into trees. But yeah, there is sort of more bioluminescent mushrooms. There was one video that I was trying to find for you guys. I'm not sure where it was at, but it was fascinating in terms of, it was just a compilation of videos of mushrooms filmed over, remind me to feed and let the chickens out. We have to let them out later because of the crows here. and the crows get in to get the eggs. But yeah, I think you might be able to find it online. It's really interesting. You'll see all of the different alien varieties. And I'm not sure, I didn't actually research how many actual varieties of mushrooms have been found. And I imagine that we still probably have not found as many. Oh, cool. So, Tim saying my saliva turned sweet during really good forms sessions of Tai Chi. Yeah, so you might be activating that pineal nectar to drip. And I can see a question from Deanne. Would you please explain that further? I did not know what happened to me until you just said that. So, what can happen is when we look into spiritual masters, now they talk about amrita or a nectar that comes from the pineal. Now, sometimes this will happen spontaneously or it will happen from Kundalini being activated. So, sometimes you can just be minding your own business and it might activate, but it is a nectar that said to be a nectar from, whether it's from like the higher spiritual realms or it's sometimes called a nectar of the god, but it's said to contain a substance that we could survive off. So it said breatharians and yogis actually will generate this and they'll live off this nectar. So think about it being like an intravenous drip coming in from our holographic universe and feeding us minerals and things. So yeah, really, it's a fascinating subject in itself. Let me just see. Oh, yeah. And John is saying, so Rita called the sacred secretion have happened or have had that happen, can do it by fasting during the sun sign in the moon phase sign. So, for example, and John's explained this to me and talked about his experiences, which are incredible. So, for me being a Leo, I would be doing it when Leo moon, I think, is that right, John? Maybe give me thumbs up if that's right. So you want to be fasting during the sun sign in the moon phase. Did I say that right or totally muck it up? Let me see if there is any other questions before I go and let the chickens out. And I can see Seema Dragon said, I've seen a DMT extraction move by itself whilst in a solvent before going into the freezer. It wasn't touched and my jaw dropped. It was alive. Crazy to see. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. That's fascinating. And yeah, interesting that they look like little crystals too. And we know the crystals vibrate and pulsate at around 32,276 hertz, I think it's per second. So they're taking us in and out of other worlds. So whether this is just that shoot out of the rocket kind of cosmonaut or psychonaut type experiences, yeah, I think we're going to find more and more evidence for that. Thank you, everyone. Well, I've so enjoyed bringing this show to you guys. Oh, and thank you, John. So yes, there is 2.5 days when your sun for your Leo sign is in the moon phase, would be a very special time every month. So yeah, definitely research that, or you can ask John. John is a wizard when it comes to that side of things. So let me just bring this up once again and remind you guys, please share this out. If there's anyone that, is a bit of a fungus, alien mushroom geek that might like this show. And I would love to hear more questions. So if you guys have questions that you would like to maybe do another show on this topic, and I would love to maybe psychically research more into being out and about and see if the mushrooms have any messages too. This would be fascinating to hear. Oh, I love you guys. Thank you. Thank you for your support. So yeah, please hit that thumbs up. Come back and comment when this video has finished, because that way I'll see it when the comments finish after the show is where we're able to see them. So please make sure to comment any questions after the show. Thank you, Jody B. And I also want to remind you guys, please use discount code Jupiter. And remember, Elena has her candles and Sophie has her bookings as well. And we have many, many things upcoming that are planned. But yeah, if you want to look into your energy and you want me to draw your aura drawing and do a psychic reading around that with tarot, I do have a couple of bookings, I think, for next week. I am going away shortly for about a month. So if you do want to get in before I go, I would love to see you guys. And thank you for being such a beautiful soul tribe. And yeah, I definitely will have a few more forest walks. And I think that over here in Australia in particular, we have such different species that I think it would be very interesting to look into the different countries and continents and folklore around this as well. So thank you guys. All right, well, have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you through the week for some more readings. Good night, everyone.